So first of all, thank you very much. Thanks for being here. It is, wow, incredible to see we're fully booked. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you for being here. Let me give you a little bit of background information. I know you don't really care about this now, but I'm gonna go anyway. So when this debate between Donna Leon and Berna González Harbour finishes, you will have to leave the room, please. And if you wanna buy books from Berna and Donna Leon, of course, you can do it in the lobby, in the bookstore. And if you want a signature, please make sure the line is not too rigid, because, you know, there will be people coming into the concert, so let people in, please. Be kind, and let's make sure that those trying to get into the room can do so. Do not think that they want to skip the line. Perhaps they just want to get into the room. Again, it is very important for you to leave the room as soon as possible when the session ends, because you cannot sleep here, unfortunately. So having said that, let me say that it is a pleasure and an honor to have you, Berna. Thank you very much, Berna and Donna. Donna is a very loved author, and she is one of ours. She was Pepe Carvalho awardee in 2017, if I recall correctly. So a big clap to both of them, and especially to Donna. So good afternoon, and thank you very much, Carlos Zanon, and thank you very much to the rest of the team for making this festival possible. It is a miracle to be today in Barcelona on a Monday afternoon with so many of you. Thanks for being so loyal to Noir, and thanks for your loyalty to the festival in its 20th anniversary. It is an honor, it is a pleasure to share this time with Donna Leon. Let me tell you a little bit more about her secret for eternal youth. And, you know, maybe I will tell you a little bit more about her secret, because at her age, the amount of energy she still holds and her productivity is incredible, even more incredible than her work. You know her, so I'm not gonna take long in her presentation. I would define her as a very coherent author with a very high narrative quality, a very cultivated person, a very concise writer who does not use gratuitous violence. She finds the perfect balance between two different elements in noir, which is, on the one hand side, the efficient search for the guilty, for the perpetrator, and on the other hand, understanding that the world has no solution. So she finds the perfect balance between these two elements in noir, and this is why readers are so loyal to her. Today, I believe we're dealing with the Brunetti number 33 case, right? Is it the 33? Yeah, the 33. 33 years, 32 the ones she's been publishing. She publishes in 35 languages, and this edition, number 33, is the purifying fire, tackling with youth violence. The first thing I would like to ask you, Donna, well, this book is very catchy. Has it been difficult for you to put the hat of another generation, the youth?
No, it isn't. I've spent a long time reading in the newspapers and talking to police about baby gangs. Because the first time I heard someone talk about baby gangs, I had no idea what they were talking about. Baby gangs. The gangs of babies, which is what they are, in a way. Do you want to start to translate part, or do you want to do the whole thing?
They are translating.
Okay. You seemed overworked. A baby gang, I came to learn, was a group of teenagers, usually middle class, who liked to go out in the evening and beat people up or break things. They were not stealing, They were not vandals. They weren't out to get the joy of destroying something. They just wanted to do something that nobody else had done before, which I think is mistaken. Obviously, people have done this before. And they usually were 12 to a group. There was a kind of order about it. There was a boss, a first leader, and then 11 other boys, and they'd follow him around at night, maybe beat people up, but what they really loved was destroying things. And I found this fascinating, because Italy is a country where up until now, at least in my understanding, there is a respect for age. And so baby gangs just don't fit into my vision of Italian culture. There's no place for them. They're too young to be criminals, and they're too criminal to be young. So they have dropped out of the news in the last year or so, since I wrote the book. There's no connection. And I seldom now read about baby gangs, because I read Gazzettino and Corriere and Repubblica every day, and there's almost no mention of them in the last 6-8 months. But I thought, this is great for a book, baby gangs.
Es muy curioso, ya saben ustedes, ya sabéis,
As
que
the
Brunetti
readers
no es
know,
muy jefe.
Brunetti
O sea, ella
is
ha
not
cumplido 35
growing
años
older.
escribiendo los
She's been
últimos 35
writing
libros de
about him for
pero él
35
no
years,
cumple años
but she
prácticamente.
is more or less the
Y sin
same
embargo,
age
ella
as at the
retrata el
beginning.
presente.
Nonetheless,
Es decir, el
the
libro arranca
author,
con
I mean, the
imágenes
book
de
speaks about the
Instagram.
present, right? There
¿Cómo
are
hace para
references to
adaptar a
Instagram.
Brunetti
So
a los
how do you
tiempos
manage to
sin
adapt
que
Brunetti to the
envejezca?
current time without him becoming older, so to speak?
It was what we would call in America, it was dumb luck. I didn't plan that. I simply did not include the possibility to do what archaeologists call carbon date. Very often when there's an excavation and they find an object, it can be when archaeologists do this, if they find a piece of jewelry or a pot or a body, they can check the state of the carbon that is in that person or in that object. And from that they can determine with some accuracy when the thing was last used or when the thing was made. There's none of that in the the first 35 Brunetti novels. And I had to introduce, I had him resisting a telefonino for years, as I'm sure many of you have noticed, because I had a telephone. I still don't have a smartphone. I have given in and I've taken to using a baby phone. No, not a baby phone. A baby phone, you all know, the Nokia baby. But I didn't put in any dates. I didn't put in any other tragedies, any other victories. I think Italy won the World Cup during this time. But I never thought to put it in. It was unconscious on my part. Now it is conscious. And with the arrival of the telefonino and Instagram, I had to give in. I had to use them, because they're all over. I do not have a telefonino, and I do not have Instagram yet. And I won't, because I have my baby phone.
Pero ¿por qué decidió mantener a
Why
Brunetti
did you decide
en
to
esa
keep
edad,
Brunetti
edad,
at the
digamos,
same age,
durante los
to,
30 y pico
let's say,
años?
depict him with the same age during 35 years?
Because the things that he is concerned with, either as a lay person, a civilian, and as a policeman, they haven't changed much in the 33 years that he's been investigating and finding guilty people. And so I can get away with it. I can do it and people don't complain about it. And I think many people don't notice. So I suspect, I hadn't thought about this before, if someone were to hear, oh, you have to read, you have to read, you have to read, and gives them a book, they're not going to know when the book took place, because there's no information, in most of the books, there's no information. It's not that important. Ultimately, and I think of this only now, it's not important what else is going on in the world, because Brunetti is concerned with what is happening in Venice. And by extension, the reader is concerned with what is happening in Venice, and not concerned with the state of the Italian troops in Africa, or who won the movie contest, who won the Venice Film Festival. That's not important to Brunetti, because he doesn't pay attention to it.
Your character, Brunetti, to keep depicting him, he's a gentleman, well-educated, he's a cultivated man, he's an opera and music lover, like you are, a family man, a loving father, a loving husband. He's very different from the typical characters in noir. Before and after, Chandler and all his generation got us used to alcoholic characters, full of scars, you know. Then comes you, but later, after you, let's say, more and more characters with weird features and plenty of problems have popped up in noir, whereas your Brunetti is always well-educated, cultivated, as I said before. Do we love Brunetti so much because he's such an elegant and normal and family man?
No, I'm not sure it's because of his virtue that people like him. It's because he's intelligent. He's intelligent, he's respectful, and he's competent. But I think he's not portrayed as a saint. And in a recent book, if I remember correctly, there is a scene with Grifoni, where she's Neapolitan, and Northern Italians have very little good to say about I Napolitani. And so finally, she says, Guido, I want to talk to you about something. You have no idea of how transparent is your dislike, and I can almost say contempt for Southerners. I'm a Neapolitan, and I don't like to listen to it. And Brunetti, as I recall, is stunned. He's stunned to silence by this, because the person at the Questura whom he most admires is Grifoni. And he says he has difficulty talking to her because he's so upset by what she has told him. And he never disputes the truth of it. He never tries to defend himself. He knows he's a racist. And he says, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And then she says, well, forget about it. And there's something that, I don't remember the passage, but I think what I wrote was, he had to try not to cry. And I think that says an enormity about Brunetti. I think that's why people love him. How many men will, in front of a woman colleague, admit to being very, very, very unpleasantly wrong about something, and then to worry that she might see that he might cry, makes him even more, whatever it makes him, and I don't know, sensitive, decent, kind, loving. The narrator never expresses these things, obviously or overtly, merely says that he hopes he doesn't cry, which is, I think, effective in presenting his character. And I think it's these little things that people learn about him that make them love him. Because from what I hear from readers, he's a love object, or he is a beloved friend to many people. And I say this, that has nothing to do with the question, but it might be related to the characterization of Brunetti. I have had over the years a number of people write to me and say things like, "Dear Miss Leon, blah, 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 I would like to thank you for the last scenes in blah, blah, blah," whatever the book was. And then comes the reason. In the last weeks of her life, my mother read nothing but your books because she said that she knew she was dying. And she wanted to let her last memories be of that book character. 4 or 5 people have written to me with similar things, that the person who was dying read the Brunetti books. And if anything about these books has ever left me absolutely confused, it was that. Because I don't see the connection. But I was very moved by it because because it's nice to be of help to people who are on their way, maybe, somewhere else, where there will be no pata, of course.
Me parece preciosa.
Wow, I find it beautiful. This statement is beautiful, and I understand what you mean. I empathize because this kind side in Brunetti, this very human side in Brunetti, which is so different from other characters in noir, in the past, in the present, and this is why I really understand what you say, and I believe to be very, very thought-provoking. Down the same line, I would like to ask you the following. In your work, you don't have like terrible, bloody scenes, corpses,
tanto descuartizamiento como vemos en muchas novelas casi
bodies
gore
turned
que se
apart.
están haciendo.
Sometimes noir is turning into gore almost.
Por ejemplo, en la escena
It's not your
inicial,
case
solo
in
hablaré
the
de las
initial
primeras
scene, and I'm
páginas
only
presentando
going to
la
speak about the
novela.
first pages
Hay una
to
pelea
avoid
de
any
las
spoiler.
bandas, de los baby
There is a
gangs,
fight
que ha
between
dicho,
baby
pero
gangs,
es casi una
but
ganancia en
it's
su-
quite an
en su
elegant
pluma, ¿no? Comparado
battle.
con la
Your
violencia que
pen is
estamos
so
acostumbrados
elegant
a ver
compared to
en las
the
series, en las
violence we're
películas, en
used to
otros
seeing
libros.
in series,
Entonces,
in
mi
films,
pregunta
and in
es,
many books. So the
¿decide
question would be the
usted
following.
conscientemente,
Do you
imagino,
decide in a
no ser
conscious
tan
way
violenta,
to
no
be
ser
less
sangrante?
violent, to be less
¿No
bloody?
necesita esa sangre
You don't
la
need
novela
perhaps
negra?
all this blood, or does noir need blood?
I do not know the answer to that question. I don't know why these books are so successful, but if you are chronologically a follower of noir, you will have read Ross MacDonald. And there's an example of someone who doesn't give in to violence. And what's his name? His detective? Archer, Lou Archer. Archer is never violent. Archer. Is it not working? No, yes. Oh, okay. Oh, now I'll take over. I don't like violence. I'm not a fighter. I'm not an arguer. I've never had an argument in my life. I will do anything to avoid confrontation. That's cowardice. That's not a noble virtue.
Or intelligence.
Or, yeah, it's intelligence and good luck. But the idea of that kind of violence, even verbal violence, makes me upset. So I could not have violence in these books. Also, I've read some of the really violent books, and there are various ways of describing the aftermath of violence. There are different ways of writing a scene in which a person who has been killed is present, or the body is present. And I could do that only with respect for the dead person. And yet I read, when I used to read a couple of Jolly crime books, I found those parts where there was death, where there was violence leading to death. I found it very unhealthy to read those things. And I shouldn't say that. I'm not naming names, but I find there's something really perverse in writing about violence and reading it, in having any pleasure from reading about it. Obviously, in crime books, you can't avoid it. But I think the dead deserve some respect. That sounds like a sermon, doesn't it? But I really can't. I can't stand, and I can't. Even though I am an American, I really get very, very upset at the idea of violence of any sort. That's the end of the sermon.
Increíble que sea intolerante a la violencia.
It's incredible that you're intolerant towards violence. The best, the best in its kind in novel, in crime. Sorry, in noir. Sorry, Venice and Barcelona. Venice and Barcelona share one joint element: mass tourism. Venice, Barcelona, also Madrid, we are suffering this invasion of tourists. So how does Venice survive, and how do you survive the hyper-touristification of Venice from a literary and human perspective? From a literary perspective, I guess it's a source of inspiration, and from a human perspective, perhaps this is something that repels you. I know that you have been living in Switzerland for the last few years, and that you do not live in Venice anymore in the last few years. But how do you experience it being a Venetian? No? What is your take about the hyper-touristification of the city, the dehumanization of cities?
The numbers, I always quote the numbers. There are fewer than 50,000 residents, people who are registered with the Comune as living in the city of Venice. There are fewer, I think it's fewer than 50. There are at least 30 million tourists who come to Venice every year. And I leave it to you to work out the numbers and the confusion on the street. There are times when the city is unlivable because there are hundreds of people in front of you when you want to go and buy spinach. And it's very, very uncomfortable when it is constant. It grew like a fungus. It grew from lots of tourists to having an overwhelming number. And it's very unpleasant to live with that confusion and with that stuffy street filled with people moving slowly and looking into windows when you're still trying to go and buy the spinach. So living there ceased to become a joy, as it had been for, 30 years. And I left. I go back often, but I go back when there are a few people. And then I can live as I did when I was there. But what also bothers me, although I am not Venetian, I am not Italian, is the hypocrisy of the junta that runs the city, one member of whom is under political investigation. Only one. Stay tuned. The government of the city has in its power the giving of a license to have a bed and breakfast or to build a hotel. Now, if you had a city with 50,000 residents and 30 million tourists, in a sane world, you would not be allowed to give a license to someone to build another hotel. You would not be giving licenses for people to have bed and breakfast. And I hope that those of you who are living in this city hear the voice of Cassandra telling you, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Your children will not ever lay their heads upon pillows in this city. No, I could become very poetic and very Greek tragedian about this. But it's coming here, it's coming everywhere. In Venice, they continue to give out permits to open new hotels, they are even better at this. The new hotels that are being built, that are being restored in Venice, because you can't build, but you can restore, they are being cut down in the number of rooms they have. So if you have a hotel, if you own a hotel, and someone comes along and buys it for you, and buys it from you, and you're going to make a complete renewal of the city, and you take an old Italian family-run hotel, you gut the building, you take out everything. It had 50 rooms, but what you put back in are 40 rooms. So the rooms have to be much more expensive, but you will have to pay less to maintain it. You will need fewer maids, you will need fewer porters, you will need fewer employees. So it's going to cost you less, to have the very, very expensive hotel that is going to give you as much money as the hotel. I'm not explaining this well, but you'll make more money if you gut the building and have fewer Venetian employees. So there go more jobs out of Venice because the hotels don't have the rooms anymore. And you would stop giving out permits for bed and breakfast, but they don't. They keep giving these out. Every time they give out a permit for a bed and breakfast, some Venetian is going to lose his house. He's not going to be able to live where his great-grandparents lived because some tourist from who knows where wants to spend 3 or 4. I find it obscene. And I hope that you people in Barcelona can somehow figure out a way and impose a way to save yourselves from having the same thing happen to you and your children. Mm-hmm. And I know I sound like I'm going to jump up and stand on this and wave a flag, but I feel that passionately about it. I don't like to see people driven from their homes. It doesn't seem right to me that should happen.
En una de nuestras entrevistas que hemos tenido varias en los últimos años, usted propuso llenar los canales de cocodrilos, pero parece que no le han hecho caso.
Crocodiles in the canals, but it seems it hasn't been the case, right?
Let me tell you about my dream. Really. And it was what it would do to tourism. So, I have to put this down. Harry and Rosa are in the gondola. Harry and Rosa in the back. Oh, it's their 50th anniversary. Oh, Harry, I'm so happy. And then all of a sudden, she looks away like this, and the gondolier's looking that way, okay? So Harry is the only one who's looking this way. Here's Rosa looking, and all of a sudden you hear splash, splash, splash of water. Oh, Harry! What was Harry? And he's gone. Because they're crocodiles. Oh, please let it happen.
Parece que no le han hecho caso.
But it seems the city council didn't buy your idea,
Pero
right?
usted necesita...
No, the city council doesn't like the idea.
En Barcelona ni siquiera podríamos...
In Barcelona, we don't have any place for crocodiles, no canals, unfortunately. Do you have to be physically in Venice to have this source of inspiration? Do you need to be there physically?
No, I don't need to be there physically anymore because I know where things are, I know where houses are, and I have a book called Campi e Campielli, which is a book about this big that has maps of all of Venice on different pages. So if you're looking for a place where something can happen and no one will see it because it's a dead alley, that ends with a wall. I can find one in Calle Campielli, and I can find where my friends live as well. It's wonderfully complicated, but I don't need to be there because I spent, 35 or 40 years there. And I still remember where most things are.
Pero su decisión siempre es situar sus historias en Venecia,
is to still, let's say, ambience your work in Venice, right? Your characters in Venice.
Yeah, sure. I couldn't write about anywhere else. The only city I know well, that my feet know, and if I'm distracted, I won't get lost because the radar in my feet will take me where I'm going. But I can't do that. I can't do that in Zurich. I can't do that in Berlin. I can't do that in Rome. I can't do that in Naples. I would love to do it in Naples, but I can't do that in Naples because I just don't know enough. It's the only city I'm familiar with. But I live in Switzerland. I live 7 minutes from the Italian border, so I can walk into Italy and have a coffee. And I can get to Venice on the trains in 4 hours, and I do often, and I hope to continue, because it's paradise.
Quisiera saber también cómo investiga.
I would also like to know about your research process. Now, considering that I am here in Barcelona and in the BCNegra, today I went all the way up to Girona to have a discussion with the Catalan police because I'm carrying out a research about a crime in Girona. And I met the Catalan police there in Girona, and of course they told me about the typical procedures, the forensics, the case. I'm not gonna say anything more, but I would like to know about your research, your investigation process. Do you meet with police officers? Do you look for real cases, or everything is there in your imagination?
No, I've never used a real case, and I've never put real people in the book. No, only one person in the book. The books. I have a good memory for places, and I read the newspapers every day, and I follow them. I'm in touch with the questore of the city, and the questore owes me a favor. He owes me a favor, and Italy is a country where you always pay back people's favors. Some years ago, the questore contacted me and informed me that lots and lots and lots of tourists were showing up at the questura on San Lorenzo, which is not the big questura anymore. And he and the policemen were tired of having people ring the doorbell and say, "Excuse me, c'è Signore Brunetti?" So he said, "Would you please write a letter that we will translate into French, German, and English and give to people telling that Signor Brunetti doesn't live there and never lives because he's a fiction. He doesn't exist. He's a fictional character." So I wrote a very elegant letter which was translated into 4 languages. And when they show up at the questor, Chapa, take this. Because people really think there's a Brunetti. There isn't. Trust me. I know he's not real. But I find it wonderful that the questore had to write to me, had to contact me and ask me to write the letter, because they had so many people going in. The real questore is out somewhere horrible in Marghera, and I don't want to go there.
¿Y cómo le va a pagar el questore el favor?
And how is the questore going to pay back the favor?
Usted ha dicho, me debe un favor.
You said he owes you.
No se lo está cobrando todavía.
So you haven't collected the price yet, right?
Bravo. Pero no le pregunta procedimientos,
does he ask you about procedures,
informes forenses,
or information about forensic reports? You do not work with police officers to look for information of forensic doctors or other professionals, other concerned professionals.
I work closely with a doctor in Switzerland, and she has put me in touch with two of the most famous forensic doctors in the world. One's in the States and one is in Switzerland. And they answer my questions about death. And these are very unpleasant conversations about how death proceeds and how people can or cannot survive various things that are done to them. But I document all of that stuff. But I do it as though it were academic research at the university. I don't like the idea of looking for somebody's prostate or somebody's liver. Because you don't want to know where someone's liver is, do you? Ooh.
Bueno, vamos a otro tema.
So let's move on to another topic. Now, in our last interview for El País, you said my country, so the USA, has gone nuts. And you told me that in 2022.
I knew a thing or two.
Que gobernaba todavía Biden.
When Biden was still in office, you already told me my country has gone nuts. I'm lost. Do you understand what is going on recently in the USA?
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. Because we're dealing with someone who is capable of changing the world. And the fact that it is someone who seems to be unfamiliar with the courtesies that one has been taught through a lifetime, it's very, very difficult to think of these things happening, being in his charge. That the person who is deciding so many important things, not only for me, but for you as well, is so back and forth and so ill-informed. No, the thing. Next, it'll be my liver. This way?
No sé. I don't know.
Okay. I think we're in business. No?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
What surprises me is the speed at which it happened. No.
¿Alguien le puede ayudar a poner el aparato? Igual no está la persona. Sí, así está bien, sí.
I think we're good.
I'm surprised at the speed with which he has demolished a government. That's what I find most astonishing. What's going to happen? Who knows? Who knows? Because the rules are all gone.
¿Y se atreve a decir por qué? ¿Por qué está pasando
They're
esto?
saying why. What is the reason behind?
I don't know. I find that there are two things that some people lust after, but really lust. They must have. One is power, and one is money. That I find that there exist certain people who can't remain sane when they're after power and money, and those people are very dangerous because they will do anything to get. I think they've forgotten that people die, and the money, you can't buy your way out, and you can't keep people, you can't exert power over people all the time. They always slip out. They always get out. I don't know. This morning at another interview, I was struck, and I asked the journalist to pause a moment. We were talking about the same subject, and I said, a great exercise for anyone whose English might be good enough or find a good translation. There's a poem written by an English, for some reason I think it was the English poet Shelley, but I'm not sure, called Ozymandias, Ozymandius. Ozymandias was a king of Iraq, I think, 3,000 years ago. And in the poem, the poet explains how he came upon, in the desert, he came upon a monument that Ozymandias had built in favor of himself to tell the world how wonderful he was. And he reads the inscription, which begins with, I am Ozymandias, king of kings. Look on my works, O ye others, and despair. He's at the peak of his powers, and he tells people that he is the king of kings, and this monument, this enormous monument, is his. And then the person who's telling the story says, I read, what I saw was a ruin in the desert sand. And then he reads, I am Ozymandias, king of kings. Look on my something, and despair. O ye rulers, and despair. He's bragging to the world of his powers, of how powerful he is. But he's doing it from a hole in the sand because 100 years, 200 years have passed. And his triumph is meaningless. I'm making a mess that the poet deserves better. Ozymandias, read it if you even read it in Spanish, because it is perfect as a model of truth. That you can be powerful, you can be a tyrant, you can be Ozymandias, king of kings. But in 100 years you won't be. And you don't have to be a poet to know that. That's the end of the second sermon.
Nos gustan sus sermones.
We love your sermons, no problem, please give us more. So you've written and you've shared your opinion about global problems such as the climate crisis, in one of your last books, the drought that is affecting the world, and also I think you have referred to the growth in extreme right-wing movements. I don't know if that's in writing or in interviews, but it doesn't really matter. So you are someone who speaks your mind, right? You do not remain silent before global realities. So the king of kings, the tyranny you were referring to, is it something you can write about, or are you thinking about writing about?
No. I stay away from all of that stuff. I stay away from making statements about something that I don't really understand. And certainly government is that. I can make comments about little things, little crimes. Because I would have to learn too much to be able to write about any of these things intelligently. And the world is not going to be changed by anything that comes out of a city as small as Venice. I think it's too insignificant, because here we're dealing with massive problems. Mm-hmm. The one thing I did notice is how much the idea of ecology has permeated the books as time has passed, because in one of the early books, it was a joke. It was treated as a joke. And in another book, it was treated as a joke because I think it was that Signorina Elettra put different, this box is for paper, this is for plastic, and this is for apples and oranges. And it was ha 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 in the Questura. But it isn't ha 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 anymore. The books are coming to treat the approaching ecological disaster with more seriousness, because that is something that I take very seriously.
Muy bien, hablemos de literatura.
Great. Let's speak about literature, which is much more refreshing and pleasant than politics and government, and very much more thought-provoking. You love reading the classical Greeks. So what do you learn from the Greeks, and what do they bring to your writing?
I don't know. I find that their sense, I don't want to call it a sense of morality, but their sense of ethics, their sense of what is right to do, not good or bad, but what is right to do, is merciless. The Greeks were merciless. And so when people did bad things, they were punished. There's very little forgiveness among the Greeks. And I like the fact that they were so clear about what the rules were. You didn't do this and you didn't do that. And if you did, and the characters are very well drawn, and some of the speeches, and I think of something like the Agamemnon, which I read serially. I usually wait a couple of years until I've forgotten, and then I start reading some of the tragedies. And the reality of them, and the reality of the emotions that the people feel, I find very moving. There's the scene in the Agamemnon when he comes home after he's been away at the wars for 10 years or 20 years, and he comes back, and Clytemnestra, his wife, has a lover. And you know, because the Greeks all knew these stories, she's going to kill him. He comes back, is up on his chariot, and Clytemnestra says, "Oh, my king, my she never calls him her love, my husband, welcome back." And she gives him a long speech of welcome back to the palace. And the first thing he says to her is, "Your speech, like my absence, was very, very long." This is his wife he hasn't seen for 20 years. And the first thing he says is antagonize her. He doesn't know that she's got the bath boiling and she's going to stab him to death in 20 minutes. But I still get a shiver when I read that, although I know it's going to happen. The fact that these myths are so deeply part of our culture, I find exciting, that we really haven't learned very much.
Y siguen alimentando
And
su
do they
literatura,
still feed your
estas
literature?
lecturas,
Are they still a source of inspiration
sus libros?
for your writing?
I don't know. I know, the only thing I'm sure of is that the writing of Ross MacDonald influenced my style of writing. I don't steal the plots, but my character, Brunetti, is very much like his character, and he got there first, so I'm copying him. It is not intentional. It's just that I found him such a wise and sympathetic character that I automatically chose his kind of character to write about. I'd do it again, but I would feel uncomfortable because the second time it would be plagiarism. The first time it wasn't.
Usted misma suele decir que la literatura.
You oftentimes say that literature in capital letters is Charles Dickens and not noir. You've said that many times. So what's missing in noir to be literature in capital letters from your perspective?
I think it's a question of misplaced target, that many crime books are interested in finding out who. Just read Agatha Christie. Who did it? The books are set loose to find out who the guilty person is. And I don't find that particularly interesting. What I find interesting is why someone did something. Because I think that's, or since I'm controlling things, since I'm writing the book, I try to make it that path that leads back to the killer. So that Brunetti has to follow not the traces of this and the traces of that and find it in the laboratory, but find it in the heart of the killer, who has left traces of contact, of dislike for the person that he or she kills. I find trying to find out why much more interesting.
Sí, pero insisto, ¿por qué no?
Absolutely, but let me
O sea, ¿qué diferencia
insist.
esto,
What
la
would
novela
be,
policíaca,
what would
de
be
la literatura
the
en
difference between
mayúsculas, de la
noir and
literatura que
literature
usted
in
misma
capital
suele citar a
letters?
Charles Dickens,
You
por
quote
ejemplo.
Charles Dickens oftentimes, so why noir is not literature in capital letters?
I think it's because it has. Before I speak, I should think about this. Unlike me, I find that the books show a lot, but they reveal little. I'm making a generalization that I shouldn't make. That the authors are not really interested in exposing human life, human behavior, in the interesting people in the book. They're interested in finding out why somebody killed somebody else. And very often they aren't particularly well written. I think one of the glories of Dickens, and certainly the glory of someone like Ruth Rendell, is the beauty of the prose. Ross MacDonald's books are beautifully written, and so are the books the first line of Ruth Rendell's Judgment in Stone is, Eunice Parchman killed the Coverdale family because she could not read or write. Eunice Parchman, the killer, killed the Coverdale family, the victims, because she could not read or write. And there is the motive. Killer, victim, motive. In the first sentence of the book. And then she went on for another 300 pages and explained to you why that happened. And it is riveting. A Judgment in Stone. I'm sure it's translated into Spanish. And there, because interesting things are being revealed, and we come to know and love the characters in the book. We come to know and love the victims. I think that is missing from many crime books.
¿Usted cómo define su propia literatura? ¿Cómo la describiría? Su proyecto literario, de su vida.
Your life literary project.
I don't know. They're crime novels. You can't call them anything else. They're not cowboy movies. I mean, they're not cowboy books. And they're not little girl in love for the first time books. They're adult crime stories. I don't know, what would you call them?
¿Yo cómo lo definiría?
Me?
What would you call them?
Bueno, lo dije al principio.
I said it at the beginning.
Precisión,
Quality,
elegancia,
precision, elegance.
No violencia.
Okay, but those are adjectives. That's not the name of the kind of book it is.
Dígalo usted.
You say it. Come on.
It's a crime book. Yeah, a crime novel. And there are many books that are as good or better than mine. I don't own the market by any means.
Muy bien. Quisiera pedirle alguna recomendación. Usted nos ha hecho recomendaciones a lo largo de los años, como algunas tragedias griegas. Leía Las Troyanas, estoy recordando, leía Orestiada, recuerdo que nos recomendó alguna vez. Me recomendó una vez la trilogía transilvana de Miklos Banfi y la devoré. Me acuerdo que usted me dijo, ay, son 2000 páginas y cuando ya solo faltan 200 dices, Dios mío, ¿qué voy a leer cuando
pages away from the end, you go like, oh, what am I going to read when this is over? So would you be so kind as to recommend us something that you've read recently and that you would like sharing with us?
But this depends on your level of English, because I read in English. Bleak House by Dickens. No. Great Expectations. Read Great Expectations. It's one of the great books written in English, because it tells how to become a man. It teaches the protagonist how to become a man. It's difficult for him, but he learns. There's a very good book by, won the Pulitzer. A Thousand Acres by Jane Smiley. It's a book about a will and who's going to be left a piece of property. There's the man, the old man, and 3 daughters. It's very, very good. And you learn why they want what they want. At the moment, in my bag, I have evidence, is Pride and Prejudice. This is about the 212th time I've read it. But it's so dreamily good. It's such a dreamily good book. And it doesn't really need a lot of translation.
Gracias, doy fe. He leído alguno de ellos y
Absolutely, I've read some of these recommendations and they are all marvelous. Smiley's is marvelous. I think I'm being told to close this, unfortunately. We are at the Barcelona Negra Film Festival, not Film Festival, sorry, Noir Festival. You've said many times that the noir is some sort of signaled pathway because it is a genre that helps you carry out a research through a well-labeled or signaled road. Is it your definition of crime novel, of noir?
Yeah, they can be wonderful because there's always a search. There's the search for the criminal, and that can be very, very exciting. And many of them are beautifully written. There's nothing that says they can't be written as well as well plotted. So yeah, I think that very often they are books that will teach you things about human life.
Pues nos quedamos con esa definición, libros que te enseñan cosas, que te ayudan a aprender. Muchísimas gracias, Donna Leon. Ahí estarán sus libros para que ustedes puedan pedirle una firma y les pido un aplauso.
Ask for a signature, please, an applause for Donna. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.